You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Wow, it's been some week. Bill Cosby led away in handcuffs to start serving a 3 to 10 year sentence for sexual assault and being branded a violent sexual predator for the rest of his life. I'm saying wow. And I'm saying wow over the women who have come forward more every day over Kavanaugh, Trump's erstwhile appointee to the Supreme Court. I said last week that this is exactly what the GOP feared, the time elapsing because more women would come forward. And I'm celebrating not my prescience, but women's power and women's solidarity and the truth. My guest this week is very fitting because Soraya Chemaly is the author of a book called Rage Becomes Her, The Power of Women's Anger. It could be the title of this week. It hopefully will be the title of many weeks to come. And we've got Fighting Words, and we've got Surrealism Corner, and I'm doing my little dance. And first, we have to go inside the headlines, even though this week, sisters and men of conscience, we are the headlines. This past week, women were the headlines because it seemed we were everywhere. We were demonstrating at Yale Law School, where Kavanaugh had gone to school. We were showing up at the Cosby trial to sit in mute support of Andrea Costand and of finally achieving some particle of justice. We were sitting in at congressional offices, both in the home district and in Washington, D.C. We were carrying signs, shouting in front of the Supreme Court. We were everywhere and we were on the move. But before I go too deeply into that story, up front here, let me say that I'll take on Cosby and Kavanaugh in fighting words at the show's end, or else it will just swallow the entire program. Furthermore, the news keeps breaking and re-breaking on Kavanaugh, so I need to file these commentaries at the last possible minute they can go into production. Meanwhile, there is other news in this country and in the world, and it's vital that we don't forget that. Like that the Trump administration is now admitting it doesn't know where 1,488 migrant children are. This follows news from the summer that it didn't know where an additional 1,475 migrant children were. These kids who entered the country illegally by themselves, slightly older, sub-teens and teens, not separated from their families at the border, in other words. Well, these kids had been taken out of federal shelters and placed with so-called sponsors. But the New York Times' in-depth report about their status raised serious concerns that they could end up with sex traffickers or be used as laborers by people who were posing as relatives. In India, what may first seem like a good news item might be actually questionable news. Last year, the Supreme Court struck down a legal provision that had permitted the practice of talaq in the Muslim community. The practice allows Muslim men to divorce their wives by using the word talaq, divorce in Arabic, 3 times, in person, by phone, or even in writing or a text message. 3 talaqs and she's out. The option is not available to Muslim women, who can only get a divorce after winning permission for the divorce from their husbands, or from a cleric or other religious authority. Now, a new ordinance, recently approved by an executive body led by India's Prime Minister Modi, has gone further, making it a criminal offense and setting a fine and jail sentence of up to 3 years for men who are convicted of using the practice. But the ordinance is in effect for only up to 6 months, and during this period the Parliament must formally pass it or else it becomes void. Most predominantly Muslim countries have already banned talaq, yet in India, Muslim women's rights activists are actually divided on this. For one thing, the measure doesn't go far enough. It applies to all of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir, which happen to have a large Muslim population. But another factor is the deep chasm along India's political parties. Modi's party, the Bharatiya Janata, a right-wing Hindu nationalist party, has fostered anti-Muslim attitudes and now welcomes the ordinance. Consequently, this otherwise progressive step is now regarded as being suspicious by the Muslim community. India's constitution guarantees equal rights to all citizens regardless of religion, but on issues involving marriage, divorce, alimony, and inheritance, you notice they all have a disproportionate impact on women, these cases are handled differently among religious populations. The women, separated by such factionalism, have been trying against huge odds to build coalitions between the factions. But it's also true that the Modi government is rightly suspected of treating women's rights more as a political football than as a matter of justice for Muslim women. The healthy contagion of Me Too is now affecting political campaigns in Brazil and religious institutions in China. A social media campaign called Ele Não, which means not him in Portuguese. I think my accent is way off. Anyway, it means not him in Portuguese. That's the most recent example of Brazilian women mobilizing, and in this case doing so against a politician who has publicly called women ignorant, undeserving of the same salary as men, and, wait for it, too ugly to rape. In one speech, Jair Bolsonaro, the far-right frontrunner candidate for president in the coming October 7th election, has declared that he is the father of 4 sons and 1 daughter, but he added that having a female child was a moment of weakness. Hundreds of thousands of people have signed up on Facebook for a group called Women Against Bolsonaro. There are protests and marches. 2.9 million women have joined the Women United to Stop Bolsonaro, and such popular Brazilian singers as Daniela Mercury and Anitta have posted videos urging Brazilians to reject his sexism, racism, homophobia, and his being a throwback for Brazilian democracy. He was leading in the polls when he was stabbed in the stomach at a campaign rally early in September, but he survived. Still, he appears to lack the 50% needed to win outright and to avoid a runoff vote. The pronounced male-female split among voters in Brazil is now being compared to the U.S. gender gap that was evidenced in 2016. Bolsonaro's supporters have a song that men sing about feeding dog food to feminists, while more than half of all Brazilian women have already vowed to vote against him. Meanwhile, in China, Me Too has affected Buddhism itself. Over the past 2 decades, the number of temples has tripled. Monks and abbots have become well-known, almost celebrities, public figures certainly, and the government has used this so-called religious flag of China as a tool to build political ties around the world to seem acceptable, and it's sent nuns and monks on goodwill missions. The government-backed revival has been credited to the Venerable Zhu Cheng, a charismatic monk who became head of his first temple at age 23 and head of the Communist Party-run Buddhist Association of China by age 49. His skillful use of social media and his emphasis on Buddhism as a kind of spiritual nationalism have attracted many followers. It's an interesting parallel to Putin's use of the revival of the Russian Orthodox Church for nationalist purposes. But over last summer, Zhu Cheng's successes vanished. Accused of lewdness toward nuns and of financial misconduct, Zhu Cheng, now age 52, has been stripped of his titles and banished to a small temple in his home province of Fujian. Government investigators have occupied his main temple in Beijing, purged his cadre of loyal monks, and scoured his books for financial wrongdoing. This is the most powerful figure in China yet to topple on charges of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Previous charges had involved figures in academia, the news media, and non-governmental organizations, all of which generally lack real political clout. In this case, Zhu Cheng's program of sending clergy abroad was what led to his downfall. Most of those sent overseas were nuns, who, like him, had taken a vow of chastity. Unlike other clergy members who were banned from using cell phones, these nuns were given phones so as to be able to communicate when overseas, and also because they were trusted not to defect. They were nuns, they were women, they obeyed. Zhu Cheng began sending one explicit messages proposing intercourse. When she said no, he scolded her that she had to, quote, break through this kind of thinking. Then he began a text conversation with another nun, asking, "Who do you belong to?" And when she answered, "The master," meaning him, a religious term, the power relationship between the two was laid bare. Religious term was not what he had in mind. Finally, the nuns rebelled. They contacted 2 senior monks who took up their cause, and now Zhu Cheng is not venerable anymore. And finally, an item about mourning a great loss. Brazil's National Museum, the 200-year-old Rio de Janeiro institution, burned down this summer, with a fire consuming 90% of the collection. The museum had preserved documentation of indigenous languages for which there are no longer any living native speakers. Gone now. Entire cultures, civilizations, chapters of humanity, up in smoke. A former colonial slave trader's home that was later turned into a royal palace. The building itself was very old, but the site of key moments in the country's history, part of the national narrative, a place of symbolism and pride that was, happily, not far from the working-class northern fringes of Rio, miles from the posh beaches of Copacabana. Rio residents are grieving, and poor people who actively use the museum in ways they used few other public institutions have complained that for years they've watched government officials funnel billions toward the Olympics and the World Cup, ignoring public services and bedrock institutions like the National Museum. Furthermore, there seems to be an element of racial politics to this tragedy. Taught in school to regard themselves as a blend of indigenous, European, and African cultures, many Brazilians still resist learning that lesson. It's said that when the great library of Alexandria burned down in the time of Julius Caesar, that was the first harbinger of what would eventually erase the medical and engineering accomplishments of ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome, and usher in the dark ages of medieval Europe. We can only mourn the loss of such great knowledge and try to protect the past, even as we try to ensure that there is a future. We have to take a short break. We've got a lot more to get to, including getting angry as a sign of health with Soraya, Chemaly, and Fighting Words. But coming right up is the Surrealism Corner when we return. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
we're back. Are you ready for the Surrealism Corner? Well, aside from the fact that some of us are living our lives in the surreal states of America corner, we do have some non-Trump related items this week. Underbilling by women physicians may be one reason why total Medicare payments for female physicians was 55% when compared to male physicians, reflective not only of fewer visits, but also billing for lower intensity of care. Women are less likely to argue with Medicare and insurance companies over reimbursements, and the companies win when there's no argument. Men are more likely to scrutinize billing and argue the amount paid. But here's the doubly surreal twist. Women physicians provide the best care. An analysis of 20% of the Medicare population admitted for common illnesses like pneumonia and sepsis proved that those cared for by female doctors were less likely to die or get readmitted over the ensuing 30 days. A new study of 580,000 heart patients admitted over 2 decades to Florida emergency rooms found that both women and men were more likely to survive with female doctors, and women who were treated by male doctors, they were the least likely to survive. Other studies have found that female doctors listen more, explain more, and interrupt less. Perhaps it's time to rethink your physician? Now, in case you are among the handful of people who still think that Google's "Don't Be Evil" motto is still relevant, here are 2 among many rude awakenings in store for you. An Associated Press investigation has found that many Google services on iPhones and Android devices store your location data even if you have used privacy settings that they claim will prevent it from doing so. The privacy issue affects some 2 billion users of the devices that run Google's Android operating software, but it also has an effect if you use Google services on iPhones. Also, Google's former head of free expression issues in Asia has slammed the company's plan to launch a censored search engine in China, a policy that flatly violates widely held human rights principles. Oh, and by the way, Google has changed its motto. The original motto, "Don't Be Evil," was backed up by the Google Code of Conduct, which was blazoned on their website and around their campus, and which read, "Don't be evil. Googlers generally apply those words to how we serve our users. But don't be evil is much more than a motto. Yes, it's about providing our users unbiased access to information, focusing on their needs, and giving them the best products and services we can. But it's also about doing the right thing more generally, following the law, acting honorably, and treating co-workers with courtesy and respect." End of quote. That was the old code, my friends. But in May of this year, Google killed "Don't Be Evil," instead of honestly just cutting the first word. Google-owned company Alphabet did adopt a motto, though: "Do the right thing." Google itself, in its updated code, states, quote, "Everything we do in connection with our work at Google will be, and should be, measured against the highest possible standards of ethical business conduct." Close quote. Well, not only do they not meet standards of ethical business conduct, but it could be said that whatever is ethical business conduct is almost, by definition, not ethical conduct. Moving right along on the doing evil front, the NRA has attacked a cartoon for its diversity, and it's used Ku Klux Klan references to make the attack. Viewers of the National Rifle Association's online video channel saw Dana Loesch, spokeswoman for the group, denounce the classic children's television show Thomas and Friends. That show, which made its debut in the U.S. on PBS in 1989 and now airs on the Nick Jr. channel, features Thomas the Tank Engine. Well, in a new partnership with the United Nations, the show has added new characters to introduce its preschool audiences to different cultures and issues. Oh, this was way too much for the NRA. Although why they're targeting preschoolers is a bit of a mystery, unless they want tots to be armed. Anyway, Dana Loesch, who is sort of like a weaponized Stepford wife, took to the air on her program called Relentless. I don't make these things up. It's called Relentless. And she denounced the kids' show for adding several female and international characters. She fulminated that this was politically correct pandering and asked how could a children's show introduce ethnic diversity when that show's anthropomorphized characters are mostly trains. Then she showed a photo of several characters photoshopped by her show in Ku Klux Klan hoods, standing in front of burning train tracks. This is surrealism within surrealism within surrealism, like nesting Chinese boxes. Take back the night, take back the day, take back the planet, and Me Too may just get us there. Accusations of sexual offense have ended the careers of many prominent men, and now the impact has reached Antarctic glaciers. When she was only 22 and a graduate student at Boston University, Jane Willenbring traveled to Antarctica to do research with Professor David Marchant, a geologist so renowned that a 7-mile-long glacier there had been named for him. But instead of mentoring her, Professor Marchant began harassing her, and when she said no, he shoved her down steep, icy slopes, blew ash in her eyes, and repeatedly made public comments about her sexuality. She did not report this at the time, but in 2016, after she received tenure at the University of California, San Diego, Dr. Willenbring filed a formal complaint with Boston University. 2 other former graduate students came forth and wrote about similar experiences on expeditions with Marchant. After a year-long investigation, university officials said the findings warranted removing him from the faculty. Now, he's appealing the findings and on unpaid leave, but his job is not all he stands to lose. Earlier this year, the U.S. Board on Geographic Names received a proposal to change the name of the Marchant Glacier, since he had been found to have created a hostile and harmful environment for female researchers and could no longer be regarded as someone who had made outstanding contributions to scientific knowledge. The board agreed, voting unanimously on September 10th to rename the landmark the Matatoa Glacier after a nearby mountain peak. The name is from a Swahili word meaning cleansed of problems here. Although why they couldn't have found a word in one of the indigenous languages near the South Pole is quite beyond me. Instead, they fell back on the Lion King. Surreal, surreal, surreal. Time for another short break, and while we're paused, maybe take a second and think about what it might feel like to be really angry. I mean really, really angry, and feel free enough to express that fully. My God, it's like a breath of lungful of fresh air. I'll be right back with a lungful of fresh air, my guest, Soraya Chemaly. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And welcome back again. Soraya Chemaly is an award-winning writer and media critic whose writing appears regularly in national and international media, including The Atlantic, The Nation, Quartz, Verge, Time, Salon, The Guardian, and The New Statesman. She speaks frequently on topics related to inclusivity, free speech, sexualized violence, and data and technology. She is the director of the Women's Media Center's Speech Project and organizer of the Safety and Free Speech Coalition, an international civil society network dedicated to expanding women's civic and political participation. She currently serves on the national boards of the Women's Media Center and Women, Action, and the Media, as well as on the advisory councils of the Center for Democracy and Technology, VIDA, VIDA, and Common Sense Media. In 2013, Soraya won the Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Communications Donna Allen Award for Feminist Advocacy and the Secular Woman Feminist Activism Award. In 2014, she was named one of Elle magazine's 25 Inspiring Women to Follow in Social Media. In 2016, she was the recipient of the Women's Institute for Freedom of the Press's Women and Media Award, and in 2017, the co-recipient of the Newhouse Mirror Award for Best Single Feature of 2016 for an in-depth investigative report on free speech and online content moderation, The Secrets of the Internet. And she's received a Wikipedia Distinguished Service Award. And she's here to talk about her new book, Rage Becomes Her, The Power of Women's Anger. Soraya, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin.
Well, full disclosure, listeners, Soraya is a friend and she's a colleague at the Women's Media Center. She's the director of the Speech Project, which I hope we'll touch on. And I gave a quote to this book because I think it's such a wonderful and needed book. So with all that as full disclosure, welcome again. The book is called Rage Becomes Her. I mean, the is not in the title. The subtitle is not It's The Power of Women's Anger. And is it ever powerful? And is this ever timely and needed? Congratulations, Soraya.
Thank you so much, Robin.
Tell how the book came to be.
Well, the book was long in the making in terms of rewrites and book proposals, but it really crystallized in the build-up to the presidential election in 2016 and the wake of that, when anger was so palpable and so palpably mismanaged because it seemed to be so explosive and on the right, really fueled by disgust and contempt.
Yes.
Which isn't always the case with anger. That's part of the point of the book. So definitely the catalyst for this particular filter on the state of women's lives came out of the election.
Mm-hmm. But it's about so much more than that. I mean, it amazes me that what are we? I don't know. Came out in 1970, so we're quite a few years in from Sisterhood is Powerful, and I feel that this is the daughter of that, or the granddaughter of that, that women's anger is still so prohibited, that women still have such a struggle even to get angry, and then once angry and boiling inside, to make it, to articulate it, and then stand behind it. I mean, I remember the years as a young woman when I couldn't be angry without sweaty palms and nausea in my stomach.
Yeah.
And that still goes on. You can tell, Me Too has broken through some of that, but even so, the backlash is fierce, so that this is so needed. I mean, what have you discovered about the persistence of shutting down women's anger?
Well, I mean, I think that you and I agree that it's not accidental, right? I mean, I think that this is a very strategic way of inhibiting women's equality. And so in the various rounds and long tails of backlash that we've been through since the 70s, and the reassertion of these very oppressive gender norms, one of the most powerful of those is this prohibition on anger and this insistence that girls not claim this anger, and that when they do, it's transgressive and that they should be punished. And at a book talk in Washington, D.C., there were two young women who stood up and asked a question. And, you could really feel their apprehension at the idea that they had this anger, but that to express it, and this is not a mistake, right? We know it's not a mistake or an error in judgment.
Right.
To express it would bring a negative response or punishment. And they knew that. And, I think they were 14 or 15, and it's something we all learn to have to navigate. And as you know, if you're a Black woman in the United States, it's even more extreme.
Yeah, we saw that just recently with Serena at the U.S. Open. The angry Black woman, unquote, quote unquote. But, in the 19th century, we know now, thanks to feminist historians, that women were literally put into asylums for being angry. It was a sign of madness, literally. And,
yes, that's right.
And figuratively. And then, of course, in the 70s, when we first began, rattling our chains, this wave of feminism, we were called frigid and neurotic and unladylike and lesbians, as if that it comes with anger.
That's right.
And communists, go back to Russia, whatever. But it still persists. And you saw it recently when the women came forward, whether it's about Trump, whether it's about Kavanaugh, there still is a prescription as if her womanliness is somehow keyed to her never, ever, ever expressing discomfort, let alone with passion.
That's right. And I think it's that idea that a good, there's a completely fundamental incompatibility between anger and being a good woman. And that somehow the idea of an angry woman is an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
And that becomes internalized really early, especially I think in the United States, where it's a deeply religious country.
Yeah. And
so you see differences in different cultures, in emotional culture and life. And one of the most interesting studies I found was one that showed how sharp the difference was between, for example, women in Germany who report very little discomfort as expressing anger compared to women in the United States who feel a lot of shame and conflict and discomfort.
Yeah. And interesting. The chapter titles alone in Rage Becomes Her. They're like a found poem. They get my ire. No, they do. They get my ire up and flexed. It's like mad girls, angry bodies, mother rage, the drip, drip, drip. Oh boy, wow, do I know that one. There are no words, the politics of denial, and a rage of your own, which I think is a hilarious chapter. But they're also really wise, and you come out, even if you think you know all this, you don't. I've been at this a long time, and I came away having learned lots of things, and also feeling more secure in my anger, which I thought I was already. I thought that the little sensors at the corner of my mouth standing there like beef eaters, guards outside Buckingham Palace, they'd gone fishing a while ago. But no, it's not only a bracing book, it's a feminist how-to book. That's almost an oxymoron, but it helps you get it out and realize what a healthy thing it is to express anger.
Well, I'm deeply honored that you feel that way. That means the world to me, really, because, I quote you in the book because there's so much that you've written that spoke to me directly over the years, and it just kept occurring to me that being able to synthesize the full scope of what we deal with, and through every life stage, right? The book is sort of structured around life stages and the expectations of the various phases of life that we go through, and how this thread of the prohibition on our anger really does weave its way through, our intimate lives, our professional lives, our political lives. And so it all really did coalesce.
Well,
there was so much pain and despair and anger after that election.
Yeah.
And it struck me how much denial there was about what that meant.
Yes, yes. It's a very wise book, and it's a really well written book, which one can't
Thank
always.
you.
That's not always true of wise books. They don't always go together, but in this case, they really do. And I'm so proud of you for doing it in the middle of all the other things that you're doing.
Chaos.
Take a minute. Chaos. Yeah.
Chaos.
Welcome to my world.
Yes, I know.
I haven't had a chance to wash my hair since 1970. It really is time. Really is time. But take a minute and talk about the Women's Media Project
Yes.
that you're the director of, because it's so important.
Well, this idea of women's civic and political participation and the ways in which the culture shuts it down really does come to fruition in the online world. And the speech project that we launched at the Women's Media Center is very much focused on shedding light on what it means for women to attempt to speak freely and have what are sometimes terrible responses and violent assaults and threats and invasions of privacy. And for several years as a writer, I was subjected to harassment and threats, rapidly started talking to other women who were in similar position, and then really did a deep dive into how these online worlds are constructed, what the product development process is, how these companies are managed, what the ethos of Silicon Valley is in regards to women, which is really, really terrible, right?
Yeah.
And so the project really came together as a way to talk about these things, define what we mean when we say online harassment, because that's sort of an anodyne catch-all for some overtly criminal behaviors, some very emotionally distressing behaviors, for tactics that can ruin a woman's professional life, totally invade her private life. And so we wanted to characterize those things, name them, create a taxonomy, and then try and improve public understanding and media framing of how prevalent the problem is and why it's so important to understand.
Yeah, it's such an important project, and it's somehow it's all connected too, because the people who are so threatening online, what I think of as the young white pale males in their jammies, eating Fritos and spewing out hate to any woman who raises her voice, they have no trouble expressing anger. They had no problem for them, because of
that's right.
The entitlement even to be angry is so structured with power and racism and sexism. It's breathtaking.
Yes, and I think there are two sides to that. One is, and I did say this exactly the way you've just described it. It is an entitlement. It's entitlement to anger that is linked directly to power. But I think there's also a flip side, which is that in the way that gendered parenting happens, boys are shut off from the notion of full emotionality, right? They're not allowed, most of them,
right,
to express the full range of emotions. So if you can't talk about being sad or being fearful or being empathetic and compassionate, and what you're left with is that the manly emotion is anger and the manly behavior is aggression and violence,
right,
then you end up with that being the display of all kinds of other emotions that, there's a feedback loop between that and fear and that and shame. And we really see that online.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do we ever? And since it's like the public square of the globe, that's pretty dangerous. The book is called Rage Becomes Her: The Power of Women's Anger, and the author is my friend and colleague, dear, wonderful Soraya Chemaly. And I have to say, not since we waved around the motto in, I don't know, the 80s and the 90s, we used to have bumper stickers and buttons saying, "God is coming and she is pissed." And
we need those back, right?
We need those back. Not since then has there been such a really thorough and helpful and can't put it down book as Rage Becomes Her. Thank you for the book, Soraya.
Thank you.
And thanks for everything you do for women.
Oh, thank you so much, Robin. I had you as my mentor, my excellent mentor. So that means everything.
Well, it's not just me. The book's getting wonderful reviews, and Soraya will be traveling around and doing readings and media, so keep an eye out for her in your locale. Thank you for being with us on Women's Media Center Live, my dear.
Thank you, Robin.
We've got to take one final break before coming right back with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Welcome back again to some fighting words. This is, no exaggeration, the 14th time I have written notes for these remarks. Each time, at some point after the second or fourth or 10th paragraph, breaking news has changed regarding the Kavanaugh nomination to the Supreme Court. Now, I know this is not a news program per se. All I can manage with once-a-week communication is hopefully some insight or at least opinion, rather than reporting on breaking news. But even opinion, and certainly insight, must depend on fact, unless you're Trump and his minions. I've delayed and delayed the deadline on this week's fighting words, driving my valiant production team bonkers and totally screwing with their weekend plans. Gratitude to them for their patience and their patriotism. Maybe we should rename that matriotism, as in mother country, because women have led and principal men have followed. I'll share with you my crazy lady's scattered notes, large pieces and post-it notes, scattered around my desk, littering it like snow, written in real time during the hearing, but including statistics from my files, notes that I made for those above-mentioned many drafts. They kind of read like a found poem or a timeline of the past few days or hieroglyphics left by a woman going bananas. Okay, here we go with the montage. Christine testimony both vulnerable and heroic. Truth, wit, compassion, banked fire. Asked about memory, the professional emerges and takes command, educating the committee about the hippocampus. I love her. Terrified, but has grace and dignity. Asks again for FBI to investigate. Keeps trying, oh God, so hard to be helpful. Is Orrin Hatch human? Her rapid breathing when she enters the scene in her memory. What she remembers most, the two men laughing. Their laughter. She holds it together, verge of tears, but doesn't cry. I cry. During her testimony, callers flood C-SPAN from across the U.S. with their stories and why they didn't report. Grassley can't even pronounce the word Ramirez, as in Deborah Ramirez, the second woman who comes forth ready to testify and who's being ignored. Julie Swetnick, the third woman to accuse, a decorated U.S. government employee with security clearances from Department of State, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and Customs and Border Protection. Her stories about gang rape, also not called to testify. Lindsey Graham calls her destructive and crazy. Committee rules and Senate rules ignored by Grassley and Republican majority. Floor is littered with broken precedent, broken rules, broken laws. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men will be sexually assaulted in this country. Rachel Mitchell, Deputy County Attorney for Maricopa County, Arizona, that's ex-Sheriff Joe Arpaio territory, brought in like hired gun in hope no one will notice that all 11 committee Republicans sitting there are white males. who eventually can't stop themselves from taking over. Kavanaugh comes in swinging, staggeringly partisan, rude, entitled, red-faced, belligerent. 5 members of the House of Representatives, Alma Adams, Gwen Moore, Ann Custer, Jackie Speer, and Debbie Dingell, send a letter to Trump and McConnell stating that they have been victims of domestic and sexual assault and didn't report. 60% of sexual assaults go unreported. Kavanaugh blusters, shouts, yells at the committee. Then he cries. He interrupts Ranking Member Senator Dianne Feinstein. He tries to interrogate Senator Amy Klobuchar in a personal manner so offensive he later has to apologize, but with a sneer, saying, "Sorry about that." Then he cries. He sobs sentimentally when talking about Dad and sports. He terrifies with anger, and then he cries. Classic male alcoholic behavior. A nonpartisan group based in Utah with more than 6,000 women in chapters in all 50 states and internationally, called Mormon Women for Ethical Government, sends a letter to the 4 Mormons on the Judicial Committee, Hatch and Lee of Utah, Flake of Arizona, and Crapo of Idaho, strongly urging them to suspend confirmation proceedings until a thorough investigation is completed. But Jeff Flake caves in and says he'll vote for Kavanaugh. Is moderate Republican now an oxymoron? Republican senators bemoan what a terrible time poor Kavanaugh is having. Students at Yale Law School, from which Kavanaugh graduated, hold a town hall about sexual assault after a campus sit-in so large it prompts cancellation of classes. 2 faculty members are arrested in D.C. The law school's dean, Heather Gerken, who had praised Kavanaugh, now notes, quote, "This is a moment of reckoning for all of us." Women are sitting in or demonstrating in front of all committee members' congressional offices. Women demonstrating in front of Senate office building, in front of Supreme Court dressed in black. Women dressed in red as Handmaid's Tale prisoners marching outside Flake's Arizona offices. The Democrats. Kamala Harris, tender and sensitive with Survivor, turns into quiet killer with Kavanaugh. Cory Booker, smooth as silk, boyish but lethal. Dick Durbin of Illinois draws blood from Kavanaugh in polite, persistent pursuit, never raises voice, asking why not a week's delay to investigate? Why not? Finally, Kavanaugh blinks, deer in headlights, silence. So Lindsey Graham belts a dramatic aria of outrage deliberately staged to distract from meltdown just caused by Durbin. The American Bar Association formally requests that the committee suspend confirmation for a week to investigate. Oh, God. Moving to vote anyway, what else is new? Harris and Booker, Democratic Young Turks, walk out in protest of abuse of process. OMG, video going viral. Women in hallway trap Flake in elevator and weep in fury, plead with him. One, impassioned Latina, says to him, "Look at me, don't look away from me. I'm a survivor. You are saying I don't matter. You are saying to all women we don't matter." OMG. Flake and Coons, Delaware, make hallway deal to delay 1 week for FBI investigation. OMG, 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 Murkowski now backs Flake. Now Collins, too. McConnell livid, Grassley befuddled. Kavanaugh must be having seizure of rage off stage. It's going to be delayed a week, because McConnell knows now he doesn't have the votes until after the FBI looks into it. But in a week, anything can happen, including the truth. And whoever thinks that grassroots activism can't make a difference, look at the women who trapped Flake in an elevator. So I'll turn my attention to something that happened a few days ago, so that I can breathe briefly, and so that we don't overlook a triumph of justice and for women in the middle of pursuit of another. While we were gratified by the validation felt by Bill Cosby's numerous victim survivors on learning that he was being actually remanded to prison, admittedly there was something sad about seeing this man in his 80s, an African-American icon and America's dad, being led away in handcuffs. Then again, I worry about all the women who hand-wring over male sexual predators' lives being ruined, while you never hear a group of men sitting around decrying the devastated lives of their female victims. So I couldn't help noticing a few things. For one thing, being in your 80s does not qualify you for automatic cleansing of your earlier acts. For another, being an African-American icon, as the black community often pointed out, usually means acceptable to white people. And in fact, The Cosby Show was lauded because the family was so recognizable, decent, and just like every other family, all in quotes, all code words for the generic, and the generic in a white racist society is, of course, white. Cosby did bestow major funding on black institutions, but the philanthropist was Camille Cosby, not her husband. As for America's dad, well, maybe. After all, we still don't have a reliable tally of the abuse, sexual and other, committed by America's dads. We do know that in poor communities of any ethnic group, single moms proliferate, having been literally seduced and abandoned by men. We do know that a recent survey of American men asking, "What would you most like to be as a father?" elicited the staggering response in high numbers, quote, "Not like my father." Close quote. Last, in thinking about the Cosby sentencing, I can't help but remember that although rumors and even depositions and testimonies had been floating around since 2005, no women were listened to until a man, Hannibal Buress, an African-American, a stand-up comic, referred to Cosby as a rapist during a comedy routine. After a video of that moment went viral, women began to be listened to more, and then more women came forward. It's a long way from 2004, when Cosby fed Andrea Constand drugs and raped her. Her case was the only one that fell within the statute of limitations. Now, 14 years later, there's justice. And since Cosby reportedly still sees nothing wrong with what he did, I'm going to feel no sympathy for what he faces. Bill Cosby, now inmate NN 7687, has spent the last 4 days in a maximum security state prison in Pennsylvania, where he's kept isolated out of concern for his safety. He had been allowed to stay at his home for months while awaiting sentencing, but he now occupies a single 7 by 13-foot cell with a 10-foot ceiling near the infirmary. All prisoners are accounted for 4 times a day at 2 a.m., 12:30 p.m., 6:30 p.m., and 9 p.m. Breakfast at 7, lunch at 11, and dinner at 4:55. At lunch one day this past week, dessert was pudding, a product for which Cosby was once the pitchman. At some point, they have to listen to us. At some point, when a wise Latina, in tears of pain, traps a white Mormon male senator in an elevator, he has to look at us. At some point, they have to look at Yale law students and factory workers, congresswomen and waitresses, farm workers and movie stars, the named and the unnamed. At some point, we become visible. Thank you, Christine Blasey Ford, Deborah Ramirez, Andrea Constand, Julie Swetnick, all those voices crying from the human heart. Thank you, Anita Faye Hill. Look at us when we talk to you. Don't look away. Don't say, "Thank you, Senators." Look at us, NN 7687. Look us in the eye. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for today. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheRobinMorgan and on Facebook at facebook.com/TheRobinMorgan. Check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book, Dark Matter, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for our show. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.